Hello, beautiful people and ugly people. No, just kidding. I just thought that might be a funny way to start the show. It's probably not politically correct, but hey, PC kind of gets in the way of a good joke every so often. G'day, Varna, Sal's Adventures, Kate. Oh, so excited for today's chat. So this is kind of like the new Canvas. It's New Canvas 2.0, episode 1 reboot, because the New Canvas, as many of you already know, was a YouTube series I started many years ago. You can still find it online. Please don't judge the film quality there. That was shot years before I decided to get into doing film and skilling myself in those areas. Hello, Tina. And now I tried to reboot this as a Instagram live series, and indeed that's what we are doing. But last week when I went to do it, my guest, the plant-based coach, a local Sunny Coast nutrition expert and bodybuilding machine, her internet service was not playing ball with us, so we just ended up in a situation where we were kind of start, not start. G'day, Kate. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh, it's just been an absolute whirlwind. I tell you what, I was going to be having Chris Doe on this morning, Chris Doe from the future, spelled F-U-T-R, and he unfortunately had some stuff come up over there in the States that meant that he couldn't do the show. So I've kind of been scrambling frantically to sort of see if I could find some people to come on. Kate had actually come back to me on LinkedIn to do with another thing that I have to do with Flicks for Good and potentially helping out, hopefully, to create some skits there when it comes to the, I guess, advertising and awareness for that. So I liked the look of what she was up to, and I just said to her this morning, hey, how about like we make that chat where we get to know each other just an Instagram live thing instead, let's just do it in front of the whole world. So she fortunately said, yes, g'day, Donato. Oh, what a trooper. And I was just like so pleased. And then I also did to run across and go have a doctor's appointment and then zip back again via the Uber. And that was a funny experience in itself, because where we are here in Caloundra, the outpatient sort of stuff is going on at the same location where they've got all the COVID testing sort of stuff going on. And I, like probably most people, had no desire to be anywhere near that zone. And so I tried to sort of skirt around it and avoid it. And when I jumped in the car with the Uber driver, my suspicion now, after the way he sort of responded, is that he doesn't really speak English very well, because I said, I hopped in the back seat and I said, look, hey, you don't have to worry because I'm not here for COVID testing. And he just kind of laughed, and I was like, okay, he gets it. And then I said, in honesty, I didn't want to be too close to the people there either. And then I said, how's your day been? And he just laughed again, which to me was the international sign for I've got no idea what you're saying. And then proceeded, then the windows went zzz, down in the back. So I think all he heard was COVID, and just put the windows down. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I thought that was funny. All right, let's get to the real comedian. So Kate, she's a stand-up comedian. She's a mum. She's part of forgive me if I get this wrong now, Stuffed Mums, or Mums Get Stuffed, and she'll fix this up when we get online. And she does like amazing coaching and facilitation work with corporate businesses to teach them how to use humour as a mechanism for improving employee engagement. And that's something that I'm all about. In fact, my business, Engagineer, before it converted into a video production business last year, was actually to do with employee engagement. So I've seen some great TED Talks to do with the benefits of employees being happy and improved productivity and positivity. And on top of that, as many of you know, I just also fundamentally want to have fun and do good things in the world. So without any further ado, and to just minimise my ongoing ranting and rambling, we will now get Kate into the chat. Kate, Hello, Sponge Photography. Thanks for popping in. The One Asian. How are you? I mean, and that's just a self-nominated non-PC name to start with. Kate, here you are.
Hi, hello.
How are you?
Good. This is a very new thing. This is my first ever Instagram anything, like video-wise, and so I'm just like, right. So hopefully you can see me okay.
Exactly right. Yeah.
I wasn't even sure whether to go like portrait or landscape. That's how easy I am.
Yeah. It's a bit of a funny one because they sort of set you up to fail in some ways because you get yourself framed up to start with and you think, oh, that's nice. And then as soon as this kicks off, then I have to readjust. So I was just having a few technical challenges with the Go, whatever it's called.
Fabulous. So yeah, am I in the right, like, should I have got portrait at the moment? Is that okay?
That's perfect.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. I think you're very well framed. I think it looks great.
Ticked off the first one. That's
now it's, forgive me because I think I butchered the name, but is it Mum?
It's the three stuffed mums.
The three stuffed mums.
Yeah.
I was solid on the stuffed part. I had that all under control. So just to clear that up for people, like, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about, who you are and I guess, what you do, and then we'll kind of dig into the full story.
Yeah, okay. So let's start with the three stuffed mums first of all, because that all started just after I had my daughter about 10 years ago. And we were sitting around, I had two other comedian friends, and we were like, oh, we should do a show about parenting. And then we're like, well, I had at the time I had a toddler, so I was physically stuffed. And then Maggie had a teenager and she was mentally stuffed. And Kay Howe, who's from Hawaii, it was an empty nester, and she was telling everyone to get stuffed. And that's how the three stuffed mums came about.
I love it. Like I genuinely laughed out loud just reading the description. So I was straight away.
Yeah, and then in true form, kids grow up, and then the teenager wasn't a teenager anymore, the toddler wasn't a toddler. That show, we did that live for a number of years. That sort of all died down. And then since COVID came along, we rebooted it as a Facebook live show, and we're just calling it the viral edition. So now I've been isolating at home with children, so I'm physically stuffed. And Maggie's working from home and she's mentally stuffed. And Kay Howe's at home every day with her husband, and they're ready to tell each other to get stuffed. So so good. So that's how that all works. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I even watched like your promo piece for the original, like from about whatever that was 9 years ago, and it was funny. You girls were talking about how you've been rehearsing, and basically, I read between the lines. I might be wrong, but it sounded like we've been sipping wine and just having a good old time for most of the day, scheming up ideas and maybe practicing a few bits, but for the most part, we've just been having a lovely time. Yeah, our production meetings usually go for most of the day, and it's usually about 4 or 5 hours of chitty chat, and then a solid hour of work, and then a couple more hours of chatting, and very unproductive.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, so good. And so just while we're on the stuffed mum thing, what's the Facebook, what's the what do they have to do? That go to the Facebook, they literally search three stuffed mums.
Yeah, if you search three stuffed mums on Facebook, we do a live show, Adelaide time, 8 o'clock on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And we're just about to finish series 1 and have a couple of weeks off, and then we're coming back for the second wave. Yeah,
do it. I'm keen. I'm pretty psyched. I'm only pretty new to this live stream world myself, actually. Yeah, I got into it by this guy, Coach Jay. He's in the States. I found him by Gary V. I started watching Coach Jay and found myself really enjoying the chat. There's lots of people here right now who are actually on the other side of the world. G'day, Kristen. Hello. The One Asian again. And, there's just all these characters, and I kind of like threw myself in there like uninvited and just decided to try and add my little twists here and there. And, I went on to his show. He does Gym Talk with Coach Jay, right? So it's not just all about training. He just does like a general kind of chat, and sort of everyone's trying to, encourage each other. And I thought it would just be funny to come on at the start, like do something that would throw him off guard. So I happen to have a parrot suit I mean, doesn't everybody have a parrot suit?
No.
So, and I just, so I had the parrot head on, and then he was like, oh, so he lost it. And then the next time I thought, I'm going to have to do something again. And so then that time I came on and I was in the shower, like, just this part up, and everybody thought that was really funny. So, anyway. It's been a fun time. So now let's talk about your comedy career. Did you start? I'm fascinated on how people get into comedy and people having the courage to go and stand up in front of people, because it's one thing I feel like, if I do this and I bomb, like if I'm just floundering around and none of my guests show up and what have you, like there might be like a handful of people watching at the time, but I don't have to post it. I could just go hit delete. But if you're standing in front of a room of people and it's just not going well, it's going to get pretty awkward. Soon.
Well, you definitely get instant feedback, which is one of the good things, but it's also one of the bad things. So
So tell me, how did that all come to be?
Oh, so I don't know. You're Australian, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, so I used to watch back in the 80s, early 90s, Hey Hey It's Saturday. And every time Hey It's Saturday came on and the comedians came on, I was be like to the family, shut up, I want to watch the comedian. And I just used to love it. And then back in, I think it was 2001, I had I was at a cafe in Adelaide, and on the counter was entry forms to the Triple J Raw comedy competitions. And so this is way back in the day where you had to fill them out with pen and send it in the letterbox. And I did that because I just went, that'd be fun to be a stand-up comedian. And I did that. And as soon as the letter left my fingers, I instantly regretted it.
Oh, it's already in the little box.
It was in the letterbox and I couldn't do anything about it. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a call saying, we've got your heat time. And I'm just like, oh, my gosh, this is awful. And I was living in country South Australia in a town called Port Lincoln at the time.
Yeah.
And I hooked it up with a work trip. So we'd come back to Adelaide. So I hooked it up with a work trip. My husband at the time dropped me off at the airport and I said, thanks for the lift. By the way, I'm doing stand-up comedy tonight. Slammed the door in his face and ran into the airport. And he was just there going, what are you doing? And I'm like, bye. And because this was back before mobile phones, right? He couldn't ring me and find out what was going on.
See, I love that. There's some elements we've lost, like, along the way, because there's, that kind of weird tension and kind of the ambiguity. And yes, that's great. I love it.
Yeah. So then I landed in Adelaide, rang a friend that I used to go to uni with. I said, I'm doing stand-up comedy tonight. Do you want to come and watch? And she's like, hell yeah. And so the first, it was like about 10 people on the bill that night. And the guy just before me was awful. So if you can imagine a really bad, we've got a really bad busker in Adelaide who you probably used to, I don't know if he's still there. He used to sit on the ground with his Casio computer and just bang it out like a little kid, singing sort of songs, just terrible. And the guy before me was very similar to that. And so I've just gone, I'm sure that I'm not going to be as bad as that. So
you were encouraged.
Yeah. I did my bit. I got a few laughs. I was like, this is awesome. And then that first laugh that you ever get from an audience, it's just like a hit of drugs. It's just like, oh my gosh, I want more. And so I finished up that gig and then went and studied stand-up, or did a stand-up comedy course and did an open mic, and then sort of hit the open mic circuit after that. And it was just, so good, but so terrifying, but so good when it worked. So I imagine it would be like jumping out of a plane. I haven't jumped out of a plane before, but I imagine it would be like that.
Yeah.
So don't really want to do it, but then it was like, that was the
best. I can completely picture it. It's I have that, I have had an occasional moment, I never want to kind of toot my own horn, but I know I've been able to get a few laughs, here and there. I know I love having a laugh, so I think that's a big part of the helping of that process. So I generally, if my brain can find a way to find something funny, even sometimes when it's just me thinking it's funny, I will probably find that avenue.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, but then to put it together and sort of practice it and figure out the nuances. Like from what I've been able to observe anyway, from watching lots of comedy specials and even hearing some people talk about it, it sounds like to really kind of, dial it in and refine it, you kind of got to just sort of tinker with things and sort of see what works and add and remove bits.
Yeah, and I think that I was probably drunk for the first couple of years of my career. So, because you obviously need a bit of Dutch courage to get up there. So, have a few beers, get up there. And so I don't know what the audience thought of my performances for the first couple of years on the open mic circuit. I had a great time. But it was interesting when, and because a lot of that sort of stuff is done unconsciously as you're going, because it's just sort of just so terrified, it's just on autopilot. Because what happened a couple of years into the Three Stuffed Mums is what we got commissioned by the Country Arts SA group to do stand-up comedy workshops for rural communities. Yeah. And there was over 30 years of experience between us at the time when we sat down to work out what we're going to do the comedy workshop on. And we're like, right, what are we teaching everyone? And we're like, we have no idea.
You just want to wheel in a drinks cart to say, okay, so start like this.
Yeah, because we'd all had a very similar experience where it had all been done so subconsciously, I suppose. Like we hadn't actually paid attention to what we were doing. So we had to really go back to basics, break it all down and go, okay, this is what happens. And so luckily we managed to get it to work. But it was quite confronting at that first bit, going, we have no idea what we actually do.
Is it a bit like story writing? So I suppose like with my filmmaking journey or my drive to get into filmmaking last year, I started learning about script writing and I've just got to be learning on it vicariously over a couple of years just because I've been watching things on YouTube and what have you. I got really serious into it and I found myself feeling quite surprised by the fact that some of the concepts of having these different sort of, the scenes, the different elements,
like the acts,
and what have you, sort of made sense to me. I thought, actually, maybe like my normal personality would have said, like, I just like to be freewheeling, kind of crazy, just take it as it goes. But then I found myself thinking, actually, having like a little bit of kind of some structure there maybe helps you navigate from A to B. There's some certain sort of things, I suppose, within comedy that you know, like if you were trying to teach comedy for dummies sort of thing, you'd be able to say to someone, okay, right, now you're currently like that terrible busker. Like if you just do these few things, you'd probably, improve your chances
Totally. And so with the sort of building on from the story sort of structure that people have, when there's a structure, like obviously there's a lot of room for creativity within that structure and individualizing the story, but the audience sort of knows that there's going to be a beginning, a middle and an end. And so then they feel comfortable with that and they feel safe with that. And then whatever happens in the middle, they can enjoy it. And so when you don't have any sort of structure, the audience is like, I don't even know where we are. I don't know what we're doing. I don't get it. And so it gets really hard for the audience to focus, and then the story gets lost along the way. And so it's sort of like that with comedy, that you sort of you have to set up a joke before you give the punchline. And I don't know, my mum's a good one for telling the punchline before the setup, and then you've got, I have no idea what you're talking about.
My kids are quite good at that too. Like I've not noticed both of them, sort of struggle with the concept of that in the early phases, and that can be quite comical in itself because it's kind of funny because they get it completely back to front, then they don't understand why nobody's laughing.
And so you've got to sort of put people into your thought process or your context of where you're going. So they need to get on the bus and then you take them somewhere and then you have a laugh. But if you're on the bus and they're on the street, they don't know where you're going. Sort of thing. Yeah, so it's quite fascinating. And then there's all these tips that you pick up along the way, and if somebody's teaching them to you, you just go, oh, well, that would save me a couple of years worth of pain. But there's a couple of ways to do comedy. There's the trial and error, baptism of fire, stand up in front of the studio lights and have the drunk audience in front of you and go your hardest. Or you can get a little bit of tips, and that's where the comedy school that I did was great, because you got a little bit of the insight to what to do, and then
you still had to refine your skill on stage in a live audience, but the basics were there, sort of thing. So
yeah.
Did
you ever, or have you ever, I guess, taken someone on a bit of a journey of teaching them some of these tips and tricks and what have you, and then gone to support them like at an open mic or something, and then seen them just massively dive and just like walked away, just snuck out the back, left them for dead?
No, we haven't had any of that, thankfully. And I think probably because most of the hardcore stand-up comedy that we taught as part of a workshop, and then we had a very controlled environment that we delivered the humour in. So the graduation shows, because there's so many different elements to comedy, and one of them is what you say on stage, but the other one is how prepped the audience is ready to go. So sometimes when you see somebody bomb on stage, from a comedy perspective, it may be that the audience hasn't been united as an audience. They haven't been given clear instructions as to what to do. They haven't had their attention focused towards what's happening on the stage. They haven't had it pre-framed with this person's a brand newbie, let's give them lots of love and support. And so most audiences, if you give them the context of why they're there and what's going on and we're all here to have a good time, then that's much easier to help them have a good, like when the acts come on, you basically sort of pump the crowd right up. So the acts come on, and even if they die, they sort of deflate it only by 50% before they get off and the next person comes on. So
you get the cane hook, the old cane hook around the neck.
Yeah. And so that's where the role of a comedy MC is very important. So they are responsible for keeping the energy in the audience going that whole entire time. And so a good MC, you won't even notice that happening, but you need that. Like otherwise, if somebody's only got a 5-minute bit, especially in open mic nights and stuff, if they've only got 5 minutes, you can't get a crowd you sort of can't come out at 100% and expect the crowd to be with you. It takes takes about 5 to 10 minutes sometimes to get the audience up to speed, depending on where they're at. So it's a fascinating thing. I love
it. Yeah. And what were you doing before this? So, I'm interested. I always love people's Genesis story. So, when you talked about growing up in a little town, what sort of size town are we talking about?
Oh yeah, no. So this was So I originally, so I grew up in Adelaide. When I got married, I moved to Port Lincoln. So
okay.
And then
how many people in Port Lincoln?
I think about 10,000 roughly.
Okay.
It was too small to have McDonald's when I was there. So
that's a good way to figure it out. Yeah, because I've got little teeny towns myself, so that's why I'm always interested. I was in New South Wales, but I've also travelled quite a bit. I haven't been to South Australia. I went to the Northern Territory, but I haven't done South Australia yet, unfortunately. That's definitely on the list. I went to the Great Ocean Road and stuff like that. The wine district. My wife likes wine. I mean, I'm pretty partial to. I'm significantly partial to wine.
Yes. Well, when you come to Adelaide, come down to I'm very close to the McLaren Vale wine region. So
good.
Let me know when you're down. We'll take you around for tours of all the local hotspots.
Outstanding. Yeah, that would be so good.
Yeah.
So, what were you doing before comedy? What was your career?
So before comedy, or I've had a bit of it, because I've been doing comedy for sort of so long. I started off. I did a business degree at uni. Then I went and worked for Westpac in their mortgages area. Was ready to start climbing the corporate ladder, and then moved to Port Lincoln very soon after just when I got married, I moved to Port Lincoln and did that. And so then I was working with the Department of Primary Industries on their education and training for farmers, which was not at all in my skill set, but you get the old job by the who you know. And then you did the comedy for a while. Then we moved back to Adelaide. I got a job working as a front office lady in a school. So I was the the person that all the naughty kids got sent down to, and had to be the school nurse. So I had to bandage up everyone's knees and stuff. And so I was doing all the open mic stuff in amongst being the school receptionist. And then I was sitting there one day at my desk and I just went, I need to give this a solid crack full time. And so I took 2 weeks off. And so I don't know if you know much about people who work in schools. They get a lot of holidays. Anyway.
Yeah, I do. My dad was a principal, actually.
Yeah. So they get a lot of holidays. I took another 2 weeks holidays on top of that during what was called the Adelaide Fringe Festival to put on a comedy show. Yeah. So I did that. Had a great time, got nominated for one of the best newcomers, which I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? Sat back down at my desk 2 weeks later and just went, oh, I'm in the wrong job. And I quit my day job.
Yeah, good on you. That's so good.
and sort of did, and then sort of just pursued comedy like full time from that point. So
did you have kids at that point?
No, I didn't. So I was about 3 years off with having a child at that point. So, did that. Freaked a lot of people out because when you sort of smash down that mold of stable job, climbing, like you've got a set career trajectory, if people can't see that for you, they get very worried. So I had quite a lot of concern, and I was hoping that it wasn't just because of my lack of comedic ability that I'm worried. It was just that they were just like, no, you can't, no. So that was fascinating. And so then, did comedy for a couple of years, had my child, couldn't do stand-up comedy the same way because there was logistical issues of needing to feed a baby and I couldn't be out for 4 hours at night and stuff like that. So then so that's sort of when the Three Stuff Mums started to be seeded, but I also started a comedy show called Recharge Comedy Shows for Mums, and that was just held at a local tennis club, and it was only for 1 hour, and it was basically, the idea was you feed your kid or you put them to bed, you race out of the house for an hour, chug down a wine, have a good laugh, and then you're back at home within the hour and no one will know you're missing. Obviously you leave the kid with somebody like dad or a partner or whatever.
Somebody has to still be in the house. Depending how responsible you want to be.
Exactly, So we did that, and then that model very quickly, because we had a couple, like we had a whole heap of mums and they'd have a great time, and then after I think the second or third show, we had mums come running up to us going, do you do this as fundraisers? We want to do this for our school fundraiser. And we're like, okay, we can do that.
Sure we do, yeah.
So I ended up taking like a mobile comedy club of sorts out to the schools and sporting clubs and running fundraising shows, which was great because everyone would just get drunk, they'd have a laugh, they'd pay heaps of money for the drinks, and they'd pay a little bit of money for the tickets, and they raised all this money, and it was like, awesome. So, so that's sort of where it all sort of continued. And then because I had because I needed, like I sort of had then morphed myself from comedian to business owner / entrepreneur, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing in the business space. So I had to then get upskilled on that. And I don't know if you know a guy called Dale Beaumont, runs a program called Business Blueprint.
Oh, good.
Out of Sydney. So I
may have even seen him on a thing when COVID first hit. They did like this one day thing. Would he have been part of that?
Conquer the Crisis, that one was.
That's it. Yeah.
So, and heads up if anyone's watching, that's still available. I think if you go to conquerthecrisis.com, you can get all the recordings, and there's heaps of good giveaways, and it's just awesome.
Awesome.
Little plug for Dale.
Good nudge for everybody. I just want to say a quick good day to Alex and to Simon, if he's still there, Simon Fennick. You should go, and so I'm doing a series on Thursdays called Change Makers, and he was my first guest last week. And he has an amazing story of being like super fit and healthy, suffering a back injury, going down a rabbit hole of like ice addiction and crime, and then jail. It's pretty hectic. But then, like, unfortunately, like there's a full redemption tale there too. So I won't steal like any of the extra tidbits, but that's available. You should watch it. Anybody who hasn't seen that yet should watch it. He's a real, and like, he won me over straight away. Like, I thought he's a great guy. Wow. So,
that's awesome.
Don't judge him on the past. Let's all focus on the future.
Totally.
Yep.
I think people who have those sorts of backgrounds just have a whole heap of wealth of knowledge and experience to share with everyone. And you just go, cool. Because you learn so much from people who haven't had it work out.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. Yeah, you do. Yeah, so let's talk about now like what you've been doing with the comedic intelligence. Is it comedic intelligence?
Yeah,
comic intelligence. Another one of your names.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, so what happened when I started doing the Business Blueprint conferences, like going to them, you'd go to Sydney for 2 days back in the day when you could do live events and travel.
Yes,
it was
remember
so
that.
exciting.
Yep. It's sit next to people.
Yeah, sit next to people, and there was drinks afterwards and dinners, and it was that was the days.
Flying freely from one person to another. Someone's hitting you in the face. Someone's flying from your mouth to their face.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's 2 days of conference speakers and then the parties and social events and stuff as well. And so I'm sitting across the table from a speaker that was at the event called Amanda Stevens, and she found out that I was a comedian. And she goes, "You need to teach speakers how to be funny." And I'm like, that's not a job. That's not even a thing. She's like, "Oh my gosh, yes it is." I'm like, "No, it's not." She's like, "Yes, it is." She said, "Come to my retreat. I have a couple of my speaker buddies. We catch up in January, go over the stuff of the year, come up and just do a session for us about humour." And I'm like, I don't think this is a thing, but whatever. So I get up there and just start giving a little bit of tips from what we sort of taught for the stand-up comedy workshops with the 3 staff mums. And they're all madly writing stuff down, and I'm like, "Do you not know this?" I'm like, "No, keep talking." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so that sort of then morphed, sort of merged my stand-up career together with humour coaching. And so I worked with professional speakers, getting them to be funnier. And then that sort of has then branched out with the business knowledge that I have now into humour coaching for like speakers and coaches and leaders and business owners and anyone who wants to get a message out with a bit more humour so that it's engaging their markets more. So
yeah, I love it. And now it's totally a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, who would have thought that I went to build up one business and I created a completely different business. So.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
There's so much good stuff in here, and this is really, I'm actually wrapped because like the new canvas, a large part of it and what I want to achieve with it, which I was thinking earlier today, I haven't even really told you really, like why, Leo, like why am I doing the new canvas? Like what's the goal? I mean, there's some goal in terms of like, yes, I do want people to get more aware of who I am so I can promote Flicks for Good, my social enterprise and what have you. But there's also like I worked in recruitment for like 6 odd years. So I did a 3-year stint, did some other stuff for 3 or 4 years, came back to recruitment, was a partner in a recruitment agency, got involved in employee engagement, or was heading in that direction. So I started another business called Engagineer, which still exists. I ended up morphing that into my video production business. So I thought it's still really engaging people and what have you. But I got really intrigued, as I was sort of saying in the intro, about the relevance of people being happy in their job. And I've experienced both. Like I've had soul-destroying jobs where I've just felt like you wake up in the morning, it's just like the sense of dread. And it's just like, and then I've had ones I've absolutely just loved, and it's been super exciting, and I've met some great people and had a great time. But I know from my research that I think, and this goes back a couple of years ago, the stats will still be similar, bar obviously the Rona. But like if you're looking at, let's say the new normal ends up being somewhat close to the old days, then Seek did a report maybe I think 2 years ago, and it was about 73% of people in Australia who were disengaged in their jobs. And then Deloitte had one that they had done overseas, and it was 80% of people were disengaged in their jobs. Now I thought I'd just use my own, powers of deduction. I was like, okay, well, so you got to someone who's like maybe moderately disengaged, is like, and then you got probably a healthy chunk of people are just completely like, this is like just shit, and they're trying to play solitaire or do whatever else they can,
the numbers are staggeringly high, and that just kind of depressed me. I thought, is this not a depressing thought that such a large portion of the world, I call them like it's one foot after the other, people, they just go, they're just going through the process and just on this never-ending treadmill, and it's just a sad state of affairs. So at the same time that I was pondering that, I was sort of really interested in, I guess, exactly what you've kind of talked about, how like these new jobs can kind of come to be or evolve, like, things like YouTube arrive, and then all of a sudden people can make an existence being on YouTube, or like here we are now, like streaming live to the world on Instagram, and but like, so I got interested in that sort of process and thinking about like, what could I do in my own little way to sort of try to hopefully maybe help somebody who's stuck in a job that they hate find a way to do something that they're actually passionate about. And I know that it's immensely difficult because like when people would come to me when I was working in recruitment and I was on the side of the fence where we made money from like placing people in jobs. If someone came to, like, I was advertising for like let's just say $120,000 a year IT sales manager role or something, and someone will come to me, they've been working as a general manager selling gardening supplies or something, and they're trying to pitch me on why they think it should be fine to make the transition. And I, unfortunately, like as a recruiter, you're not the ultimate judge. Like you're really almost like the henchman for the companies who you're recruiting for, right? So if they've said like absolutely, we don't want these sorts of people, like you just have to use that almost as part of your criteria. So it's not your own personal assessment. So they would be trying to talk to me, and you can sense that kind of like hope and like, is there a chance? And I'd be thinking I'm about to squash your hope, and that's what ended up happening most of the time. I'd end up saying to people like, it's going to be, you're either going to have to, take a massive pay cut and try and start at the bottom, and then you're potentially competing against all the youngsters who are sort of coming through, and there is an ageist sort of factor out there in the world in hiring, or you're going to have to do something radically different. And I've come to the philosophy that one of the best ways, in my opinion, but not easy, but one of the best ways to actually break out of doing one thing and do something completely different is to go down the entrepreneurial path. And so I'm talking to people, and that's what I'm interested in talking to people who have made some sort of radical career change and how it came to be. And so when I was looking at your story, I was like, okay, I can connect the dots, bar like that part of how did you become a comedian to start with. But I still thought like that there was enough deviations in there to kind of to make it relevant. So I'm just so stoked. And so anyway, you continue now. I'm just like at a big spiel.
So what I found fascinating, like you said just before, about 73% of the workplace are disengaged.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, if you're trying, especially in times of COVID where things are starting to get tough and people are tightening their belts, if you've got potential to improve your workforce engagement by 73%, like that has got to be one of the quickest ways to increase your results, doesn't it? Like if you get people switched on and doing the work, then labour is often one of the biggest costs, and to not have that functioning at its optimal performance, I think is just fascinating. And it fascinates me too how people attempt employee engagement. So a lot of it is what I consider external factors. So like, let's do flexible working hours, or have fruit in the breakout rooms and that sort of stuff. And that's all external to the actual person. And I'm sort of only just starting to get into the engagement in a corporate sense, but I haven't come across things that actually help people feel good in themselves and help them feel like they're validated and worthwhile, and therefore do more. So I have this saying that when you feel good, you do good. And if you feel like shit, or you feel like crap, you're probably going to do crap. And I think that that's where we're seeing a lot of people is this, they don't feel good. Like I was doing some, I call it research, but it was just I was separated last year, so I needed to do a bit of temp work to just tidy up and to sort of stabilise the income factor. But I call it research now. And there was one of the people that I was working with. Yeah. So one of the people that I was working with, the big boss was one of the groups that I was working with. The big boss was sitting in his office. He'd come out. He explained to somebody that they weren't doing something appropriately, or this wasn't up to scratch with their Word document or whatever. And he said it in a way that probably wasn't particularly friendly. And it was quite abrupt because he's the boss and he has things to do. And so he came out and he was like, rah, 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 rah. And then he walked back in and thought that it was all finished. Yeah. And what I noticed because as a comedian, I have to be really switched on to the audience so that I can make sure that I give them what they need so that I can do what I need to do. Yeah. And so I really focus in on people. So what I noticed is that after the boss went back into his office, the person that he spoke to was almost in tears. Somebody else came running straight up to them and had a chat to them and was making sure that they're okay. They ended up going off to the bathroom to have a bit of a reset. The person that was sitting behind me, or the two people that were sitting behind me, one of them was leaving at the end of the month. He'd finished his contract and he was out of there. And the person sitting next to him turned around to him and said, "Oh, I might be leaving. I might be joining you if this sort of stuff continues." Right. And then the rest of the energy in the office just went flat, like it was dead. And it was like that for about 45 minutes to an hour before it then started to pick up. And so you could tell that in that hour where everyone was just like, ugh. And there was only one person that got spoken to harshly, but the whole team of 6 felt it. And so it all sort of just went, ugh. And so the way the manager conducted himself probably lost close to 6 hours worth of work from his staff. But also, who knows how much other damage it did from I'm looking for a job in my lunch hour or whatever. Like, it's just that tiny little breaks of I'm not committed to the point where then they just leave. And so disengagement is so damaging in a workforce because what happens is that it's just not fun. Like, if you're not engaged, it's just not fun. And then that sort of starts to cause conflict. And so everyone starts whinging and attacking each other. And then because everyone's whinging and attacking each other, nothing gets done. And so then the productivity goes down lower and then everyone starts to get overworked and stressed out and there starts to be a bit of sick leave happening from that. And then from that, then like it's just gets really unfulfilling in the workplace. And then that obviously leads to the turnover and the sick leave and stress leave, like the long-term sick leave, stress leave, the turnover. But what's even more disturbing about that is that when people are just not having fun or just when it's really unfulfilling, you're not too far away from mental health issues from that point. Because if this is sustained over a long time, it's like, you know what, I'm depressed, I'm not enjoying this, it's just blah. And so where you think that it's just a superficial thing of let's just engage people because it's the thing we should be doing, it's actually really, really important for the health of your workforce completely.
Yes. So I'm just going to answer Angela. She said, are we talking about culture? And yes, we're basically just talking about workplace engagement, employee engagement, and the way that Kate has, I guess, found herself in this situation where through comedy as a mechanism and through her own intuition as a comedian is able to come into a business and work with leaders and speakers and people like that to sort of, I guess, clue them in a little bit onto, the benefits of going in the other direction. Because like in the same way that negative stuff could all bring the whole thing down. And yes, I completely have seen it and I've heard 6 years of interviewing people, 4 to 5 interviews a day on average, always asking people about why did you leave this job, and you hear the story. And there's so many terrible stories about bad things that have happened or just people not, and I was in a job once, just had this manager who was just a nut, and I'll end up getting ripped off, like they were palming sales off to this other guy. It was just, it was the worst, I was young and naive. I kind of left another good job, which was quite a good job, but I was feeling a bit of pressure there, and I thought
this other thing was bright and shiny, so I went over there, and then it was not a good thing at all. I've experienced it, I've seen it, I've heard people talk about it, and I just love this idea of bringing concept of bringing comedy into it. So out of interest, what are the first kind of things that you start to tell people about, how to be funnier?
Yeah, so in a business, so what we need to realise is humour in a business context is completely different to humour as an entertainment concept. So humour for entertainment, like if you're a comedian, all you are doing, your number one goal is to get as many laughs as you can in as short amount of time as you can, because that is the goal, and that's what comedians are paid for, right? It's like entertain and make me laugh, monkey boy, basically.
You don't want mildly funny.
No, but if you put that context of like getting laughs, cracking jokes, and being funny into a business context, it doesn't work. And that's where the big thing for businesses is, like, we don't want that in our workplace. And so there's this massive disconnect about all the benefits of humour. Like, there's hundreds and hundreds of studies about the benefits of humour, but then the concept of humour just doesn't sit well in a workplace. So what we need to do is think about humour in a different way. So humour in a business context is for getting attention, it's getting for connection and getting engagement. So it's like having the ace up your sleeve, so the attention, connection, engagement. And when you think about how do we put humour in to get people's attention, it could be something as simple as starting off a staff meeting, like with a funny YouTube clip. So if the meeting starts at 10:30, at 10:29, the YouTube clip starts, and we watch that for however long it goes, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then we start our meeting. Now, I would be on time to a meeting if I was going to get a laugh at the very start just by watching a funny YouTube clip, right? The second thing is that all the study of gelotology, which is the benefits of laughter and stuff, it has scientific properties that it will reduce your stress levels, it will increase your endorphins, it will reduce your blood pressure, it will increase your muscle relaxation sort of thing. So it's almost also like hitting the reset button on the group to just go, okay, we are here for a meeting. We are not here to bring all of the crappiness that you've had in your day or the stress that you've had in your day or whatever. It's like, let's hit the reset button, make you feel good, and now we can talk about the situation at hand. So it's just something like that. It's that finding the fun so that you can help the mood. And then even if it was just one YouTube video at the start of a meeting and nothing else changed, I think you would probably find pretty quick results.
That's great. Wow, that's easy. And that requires you don't even have to be funny. Like, you can be
you just have to curate.
Boring. You just have to know. Like, you just have to be able to basically look at the likes on the YouTube thing that's supposed to be. And obviously you want something that's going to relate to your audience. So if you've got a workforce that are all young school leavers, it's probably going to be a different sort of humour to if you've got executives that are sort of in their 30s, 40s, 50s. So you definitely still at least have watched the YouTube clip. Like, just don't just go only by the likes, and you could pick it. I mean, there's some people out there that I think are pretty funny, but some other people would be mortified by, right? You know, some pretty, because ultimately a lot of humour centres around people probably having a laugh at somebody else's expense. So,
and this is the thing that I have. I'm really hot on when I teach humour nowadays, is not having a laugh at somebody's expense. So I don't know if you're familiar with Hannah Gadsby. She did a Netflix special called Nanette, and it was all about her trauma and how it's a fascinating piece of work.
Got to check it out.
Hannah Gadsby Nanette. That's her first show, and then she's since released the second one called Douglas. But I'm just going to, have we got time to quickly share this story? I'm not sure how long we're going for.
We've got 10 minutes, 11 minutes. I love stories, so go for it. If someone kindly put Hannah Gadsby in the comments, that would be amazing.
So Hannah and I
I'm going to write a note, actually.
myself.
Yeah. So we started our comedy careers at a very similar time. She was the person who actually won the Best Newcomer Award the year that did the Fringe. So, yeah, well, I'm more than happy with that because she's had way greater success than I ever have as a comedian. But so I worked with her in a show called Titters, very first Fringe. She used to tell all these jokes. They were hilarious. And then in Nanette, what she did is unpacked all of the jokes and talked about where she had to stop them to make them funny, but where they actually went after that.
Right.
I won't say too much about it to ruin the Nanette experience for you if you haven't seen it, but it was quite fascinating. And so she basically grappled with the whole concept of Nanette was that she was quitting comedy. She had had enough of doing self-deprecating humour because for her it wasn't humility, it was humiliation. And she had grown up in Tasmania as a homosexual, or coming out as a homosexual when it was illegal to be homosexual in Tasmania.
Right.
So she had grown up hating, had grown up homophobic when she was a gay person. So it's completely messed up. And so she had humour and comedy as her only outlet where she thought she could have a voice. And so that's why she sort of got into comedy, and then had done a career in self-deprecating humour. And I actually flew over, so she did the live show at the Adelaide Fringe. I was overseas at the time, so I missed that show, but I flew to Melbourne Comedy Festival to watch it live. I remember bawling my eyes out through the whole entire show, walking out, just going, I don't care what anybody else is seeing, like all lined up, because it's at their Melbourne Town Hall. There's like 20 shows or something. Everyone's lined up everywhere. I'm like, whatever you guys are going to see, it's going to be nothing compared to what we just saw. Like it was an absolute game changer for me. So she, and then it's changed a tiny bit since the live show to the couple of years later when it got put onto Netflix. But that whole putting yourself down in order to feel like you have a voice, I just really, really resonated with, because a lot of my humour was around self-deprecating humour as well.
Right.
And a lot of my parenting humour was around that as well, which was just not good for me mentally, but that's another story. You might have to get me on for another, because that's like a huge story.
Yeah.
But
you can come on Tangent Tuesday. They go on Tangent Tuesday. It's a real thing, and that is actually it is a thing now. It wasn't a thing, but I made it a thing.
Nice. So when you do, especially in a business context, if you're like a coach or a speaker or a leader and you're trying to build a career based on credibility, if you're using self-deprecating humour, it's actually just cutting away at your credibility. And so you don't want to cut away at your credibility, but likewise, you also don't want to have a laugh at the expense of somebody else. Because if you're trying to use humour for that ACE, so the attention, connection and engagement, if you're like extraditing one person, whether that be yourself in self-deprecating or somebody else to be the butt of the joke, if that person is being excluded at the joy of everybody else, that's not a great way to do humour.
Yes.
That
makes it complicated. I mean, I'm so intrigued now because I know that so much of humour, like, and my wife and I have even commented about it, like, because sometimes it depends what mood you're in. If you're in the wrong mood altogether, and this is why you can see someone can have a set that could be quite funny but actually bombs terribly, then you can watch something and you think, this person's just a really mean-spirited person. Or we were in New York and we went to a comedy club and just heaps of it was like jokes about suicide. And we'd happened to notice all these like kind of suicide awareness things on their trains and stuff. And we thought, I wonder if they're having a real issue with suicide here. And then the comedians just all like making these funny jokes about like, I might just kill myself, like, just really dark. And we're just like, this is not really that funny, So I'm intrigued.
Yeah, and so you just have to be really mindful of the topics that you choose. And so I would much prefer to pick very innate things that are a lot safer. So I call them humour seeds. So it's things that are simple, everyday, mildly exasperating, and detailed. And they're the things that are much safer topics of humour, especially in a business context, because you don't want to be putting out any sort of humour that's going to offend anyone. You end up on a harassment case, or you end up losing your career. And especially nowadays with things being online and virtual, everything's recorded, and it's like everything you corporate is recorded and can and will be used against you if you mess up. Like, it's not just, oh, he said something a bit off in a meeting. It was like, he said something a bit off in a meeting, here's the recording of it, see you later career. So we need to make sure...
there's a world on a warpath to smash anybody who might say anything that's slightly offensive.
Exactly. So it's things like, I'm just trying to think, there's... Brad Upton. So we were talking about before about getting YouTube clips. There's a great channel called Dry Bar Comedy. It's all clean comedy.
Oh, yeah. I think I've subscribed to it.
Yeah. So there's a gentleman called Brad Upton. He talks about, there's a great video about a windstorm upgrade. And he talks just things about, Seattle's had 5 windstorms this year and they've all been on a Thursday. Do you know how I know that they've all been on a Thursday? Because that's rubbish day. And all the bins have blown over and all the rubbish goes everywhere, and I have upgraded my bin every single time to a better bin. And so it's that shared experience of, like, if you've been in a windy spot when there's bin day, you know that that's funny. You know that if you get a better bin than the one that you had, it's even funnier, sort of thing. So they're the sorts of things that you can all have a shared laugh about without offending anyone or having I call it comedy with a casualty. So
yeah.
So that's good.
That's good, and I think that's where the 3 stuffed mums is funny, and just. But there's also the beauty, like even in just the little bit that I've seen. There's this there's just the beauty of you guys and your relationship, right? And that's the thing. I just find it really interesting how people interact, and over time, this is the thing with great friends. And this is I've got this mate Rick who I asked yesterday because I was kind of still knocking together Tangent Tuesday. The good thing with Tangent Tuesday is that worst case scenario, I can just get on and talk a whole bunch of shit, which I can do really easily, and just go on to like whatever angle I've got. And tangents, and we did go on some tangents, and as I put in my footnotes, or my notes, as long as you come back and tie off the loose ends of the story, that's kind of my rule of thumb. That's the only rule. Other than that, it's open slather. And the good thing is that I can have anybody on there that I want. I didn't realise this at the time, but as I started to then approach people about different shows, I was like, oh, okay. And so yesterday I just thought, it'd be kind of interesting if it was like a call-in type sort of thing. So it was almost like I have like 3 or 4 people who are just doing little 10-minute segments, and then other people could possibly come on, random people that I've possibly never spoken to before, right? And and I just thought, maybe if I had 3 people, like that would be a good number. And I approached my friend Rick because he and I have like a really funny repertoire. He's this comedy guy who I worked with years ago, and he just was flat out, it was just not for it. He's like, no, that's not my. He's like, that's not my. What are you talking about? You'd be amazing. So I haven't given up hope. All right. Hey, so the countdown time has just come on now. So we've got
look at that. We nailed it.
About a minute and a half. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real joy and a pleasure. And I hope to have further opportunities to talk to you. Everybody, just as you. No, well, if you're not already following me, follow me for Brad for Good. That way you can see where I live, which is beautiful, and I leverage, and you can hopefully digest some of my propaganda, and and we can have some fun and do good along the way. Thank you so much, Kate. It's been a real pleasure to have you on here and to have a chance to meet you and talk to you. And let's everybody get onto it. 3 stuff months. So when are you going to be? So there's a series already there. So there's content we go and enjoy straight away.
Yep.
And then when do you come back?
And then we're having 2 weeks off. So I think we come back at the beginning of September. So we've got one more show on Thursday, and then the beginning of September.
Awesome.
And I was going to say also too, one of the other super quick 30-second tip on how to be funny is if you want to be funny coming out, funny needs to come in. So my tip is to fill up on funny. If you, I've got a Facebook group called High Performance Humour, and we just have a whole heap of stuff in there that's completely appropriate types of humour, like what we were talking about with comedy without a casualty. If you join up in there, say that you're from Brad's show, so I can give you a shout out. And
yes,
and then you can fill up on funny, because then funny goes in and then funny goes out randomly. Like you can sort of use it as a Rolodex and go, oh, I know
3
something
seconds
about
late, Kate, and we're gone. Hello, beautiful people.
And that was a wrap, says the voice from the clouds. Thanks for coming, guys. Don't forget, share it with your mates.